This episode of the Beef Market Update is brought to you by SmartLick. When the weather turns cold and forages fade, Flaxlick tubs deliver omega-3s that help cows hold condition and support pregnancy through winter. Weatherproof and self-fed, it's nutrition that works while you focus on everything else. Visit smartlick.com to learn more.
Let's do the beef market update, and let's bring in Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are we doing?
Well, we've had better weeks, but I personally am just fine.
Good. Yeah, it has been a difficult week for the cattle markets. I will say this: I've been getting a bunch of audience feedback. There was an audience member that said, "You know what? I'm a young cow calf producer. My favorite things about Real Ag Radio is hearing Anne Wasko. Why is she only on every 2 weeks? I want her to be every week." So you're in demand, and the way these markets are moving, we may have to change that. So, hey, what's going on in these cattle markets here? Just break it down for us. Of course, there's a lot of variables, but
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
up?
As you know, and the listeners know, I like to start with that cash. It just gives us a place to start. And it was a tough week, Sean, as I alluded to already. So in Texas, we're down $4 to $6 this week. 222 to 224. Nebraska was also off 215 to 218. Their dressed market's $10 lower, 340 to 345. So the market certainly has had this bearish vibe for some time. Well, literally since October the 14th, if you want to be specific. And it's just really struggled to get past the worry and the uncertainty of all this news, which we'll talk about. But let me get through my known stats. Cutout is, of course, following this, and this is a bit of a concern. So the choice was off $2, 371 was the number last night. And why it's a little bit of a concern to me, Sean, is that this is normally when we would have had some of that up heading into U.S. Thanksgiving next week and the holiday season in December. So I think a good word is it's been very disappointing, that wholesale market, which then leads you to wonder, is that being affected by a disappointing retail market? And so all those demand pieces have got big question marks behind them. Let's put it that way. At this time of year, it should have been better than it is. But granted, we came off the best prices ever going into October. Cattle feeders in both countries are behind in terms of their marketing. So carcass weights have gotten big. Record weights 2 weeks ago in the U.S. and record weights for us here in Alberta and Ontario. So it's showing you these slower marketing, smaller kills. We aren't getting through the cattle. And that just is an added weight. Over the years that you and I have talked, Sean, that's always an added weight to the market. So that's happening. We are going to finally start to see, and you've talked about other commodities, but start to see some U.S. government reports out. Today will be the U.S. cattle on feed report. The guesstimates for this afternoon's report down 2% for the numbers on feed on November 1st, and both placements and marketing's down 8%. And again, Sean, it's going to really show, I think, when it comes out this afternoon, that the placements into the southern U.S., because of that Mexican border still being closed, down, but we've seen placements into the northern tier states, especially Nebraska feeding areas, up. So very different regional placements, and we'll talk more about Mexico in a second. Or are you're looking like you want to jump in?
I want to ask. I just want to clarify. Did you say the box beef price is also receded this week?
Yes, down two.
Okay, so here's what's kind of fascinating. If we see right now we have Packers losing a lot of money. Okay, now if the box beef price held and the price to the producer went down, then we're actually, some of the things the president has done here at the White House level is going to, is trying to rectify some of the losses that Packers have. But if we have the box beef price coming down, got to watch that retail price. If that retail price stays sticky because there's a lot of demand in the grocery store, and in the grocery industry doesn't accommodate what the president wants, all that's happened is we've put more margin in large grocers.
Can happen. And of course, again, because we're missing data, and one of them is that retail data in the U.S., we can only speculate. But you're right on, right? The tree you're barking up, you're right on.
Okay.
I do want to talk about the local market. Go ahead. I'm going to agree to just what we were off as well, steady to 3 lower, dressed in Alberta, 490 to 495. There was some live trade at 295, so that'll be off a wee bit from last week. And as I mentioned, our weights are big too. if you're a cow-calf producer, and obviously there's some listening, that market did appear to find some stability this week on the calf market. It had come down quite a bit over the previous 3 or 4 weeks, but it did look like it found some stability because numbers are certainly smaller, as we know in Western Canada. One thing we do have, I won't get into details on it, but CanFax did release their Western Canadian cattle on feed report for November 1st last Friday. And in a nutshell, Sean, on-feed numbers continue to be up a wee bit. And that tells me placements were down a wee bit. But that certainly tells me we continue, even though we don't have trade numbers since August because of the government shutdown. We'll get them shortly. But my guess is that feeder imports have continued to roll north because we've got 1% or more cattle on feed in Western Canada. So that's going to be my guess, but we'll confirm that when we get some numbers out. I think, looking at the futures market this morning, lots of volatility, lots of uncertainty, hugely frustrating, but the market's just simply trying to deal with all of this news that's coming out of the US in terms of this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. One of them that has happened overnight is the Brazilian tariffs, the tariffs on Brazilian beef and other products, but in our case, beef, have been removed, the extra tariff. So this is the tariff that was placed back in July, if you will.
Yep.
And that was kind of the markets. If you look at a chart, Sean, that was the launching point for a lot of these, the commodities on the cattle and live cattle and feeder cattle side. So if that launching point, if now that factor, that policy has now been reversed, the market's trying to get back to that level, in my opinion. So that's what's going on. That's one of them. The other one, I think you had a listener kind of reach out to you on the Mexican topic.
Yes.
So maybe reverbiage the question.
I don't have it in front of me, but
okay.
it was about.
I think it was basically, how many are we going to expect to cross the border, when the border does reopen between Mexico and the U.S. Just as a reminder, historically, kind of 1.2 to 1.4 million head of feeders have moved from Mexico into the U.S. on an annual basis. And of course, it's been, for the most part, closed for all of 25. So I guess I thought, first of all, when you sent it through, great question. And I wish I had a better answer because we don't know the reopening date yet. The markets are trying to, guess when that might happen. Sometime in 26, I think we can all agree to that, but when? Is it January? Is it April? Is it further along? So that's the hardest thing. But in response specifically to the question, that once the border does reopen, I do think the U.S. will go back to their regular way of business, i.e. bringing those lighter cattle in to grow and finish, as they have over the last many years. So I do think that gets returned. It's not like those cattle are gone. We've always got we've got the old crop calves and then we'll have the new crop calves. So I do think that will return quite quickly. The economics, I guess that's where I'm leaning, Sean. The economics are going to support that, i.e. feeder cattle market much stronger in the U.S. than that in Mexico. So that's why those cattle move north, and that's why we'll return to moving feeders as soon as that border opens.
Man, I'll tell you what, if it wasn't the market uncertainty and volatility and the political risk here now, because here's the thing, the White House is doing this today, or, on this moment here in November 21st, it doesn't mean that on November 26th, there's not a reversal and a policy change. And this becomes very, very difficult for ranchers and feeders to try to steer through this. It's especially when there is so much risk on the table from a pricing perspective.
Well, right. And especially when some of these policies, they obviously they impact supply when we start talking about Mexican cattle and or Brazilian beef, but then other things talking about retail beef prices are too high. Well, then that's a demand worry, right? And so that's why the market's having all of these reactions and big reactions. The market's off hard today. So understandably, the markets don't know what to do. They're trading off in this uncertainty, and it's very frustrating for sure.
And thanks so much for joining us here today for the Beef Market Update.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the Beef Market Update, brought to you by SmartLick. Flax-Lick tubs deliver omega-3s for winter conditioning, supporting pregnancy and calf development, so your herd performs and you rest easier. SmartLick, premium, weatherproof, self-fed nutrition that pays you back. Learn more at smartlick.com.